Have you ever stopped to wonder how a company can make its brand feel exactly the same whether you're in New York or Nairobi? Well, today we are going to unpack the incredible strategy behind global business. We're going to explore how these massive companies manage to be everywhere at once without losing that crucial local touch. So let's dive right in. Just think about that for a second. This question, it really gets right to the heart of the challenge we're talking about today. It's this delicate, constant dance between global consistency on one side and, local relevance on the other. All right, first things first. Before we get into the weeds, let's make sure we're all on the same page with some key terms. To really understand the game, you've got to know the playing field. So, our first big term is globalization. And believe me, it's so much more than just shipping boxes from one country to another. It's this huge, sprawling, interconnected web of, well, everything. We're talking money, tech, information, jobs, and even culture, all flowing across borders like never before. Now, when a company decides to go global, this is the new world they're stepping into. And it's a world of extremes. On one hand, you've got these massive opportunities. I mean, literally millions of new customers. But on the other hand, you've got these huge risks. Things like political turmoil or a currency crash that could just wipe out your profits overnight. It is the ultimate high-stakes game. So how in the world did we get so interconnected? I mean, this didn't just happen by accident, right? There are some really powerful forces that have shaped and are still shaping our global marketplace. Let's take a look. You can really see the evolution here on this timeline. It all kind of kicks off with the Industrial Revolution, which just fired up global trade. Then you move to these post-war agreements that created a stable financial system. And then, bam, the internet, a total game changer. More recently, you've got the rise of economic powerhouses like the BRICS nations, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And of course, the huge post-COVID push for digital everything has put this whole evolution into hyperdrive. You know what's really interesting here is the image of this web. It really shows that globalization isn't just one thing. It's this whole network of interconnected drivers, everything from free trade agreements to instant communication, all working together, all tangled up to make this global marketplace possible. So let's break down a few of the biggest factors. First up, you have the socio-political landscape. And man, this is a big one. Think about it. Labor laws in the European Union are completely different from those in many parts of Asia. A global company can't just have one single set of rules. They have to navigate the specific laws and, just as importantly, the cultural norms of every single place they operate. Then, of course, there are the economic factors. Something that seems simple, like a tiny shift in the exchange rate between the dollar and the euro, can have a dramatic impact on a company's profits literally overnight. I'm telling you, these are the kinds of numbers that keep global finance chiefs up at night. And now, more than ever, you've got to consider ecological factors. Consumer demand for sustainable products and new government regulations around climate change, these aren't just ethical concerns anymore. No way. They are powerful economic forces that are driving business innovation and completely changing how supply chains are designed and built. So the single most important thing to remember here is this. None of these factors exist in a silo. They're all connected. A political election can trigger new trade barriers, which then causes an economic slowdown. A climate event can disrupt a supply chain, creating massive economic and social ripple effects. It is all one big interconnected system. Okay, so this complex, interconnected world brings us to what is probably the central strategic puzzle every single global company has to solve, and it's known as the global dilemma. Okay, so here's the tension. On one hand, you want to standardize everything. It's way more efficient, it cuts costs, and it helps you build a really consistent global brand. But if you're too standardized, you risk coming off as culturally clueless and totally alienating your customers. On the other hand, you could customize everything for each local market, but that gets incredibly expensive super fast, and you risk losing the very thing that makes your brand recognizable in the first place. So how do you actually solve this? Well, let's go back to our hotel example. A company like Marriott absolutely nails this balance. They maintain these core brand standards, the look of the lobby, the quality of the service, so that a Marriott feels like a Marriott no matter where you are in the world. But they adapt the crucial details, like offering halal food options in the Middle East or putting region-specific dishes on their menus. That is the global strategy in action. All right, so who is actually responsible for making all this happen? Who's the one making these tough calls day in and day out? Well, that brings us to the absolutely critical role of the multinational manager. To be really effective, a global manager has to wear four totally distinct hats. First, they have to be the strategist, the one setting the overarching vision. Then, they're the architect, designing how all the resources get used. They also have to be the integrator, making sure global and local operations work together smoothly. And finally, they're the coordinator, leading teams from incredibly diverse cultural backgrounds. And to do that job well, you need a very, very specific set of skills. We're talking about deep cultural intelligence, the ability to make confident decisions even when you don't have all the information, and the foresight to see what's coming around the corner in the market. Let me tell you, this is not a job for the faint of heart. And this is exactly why this leadership role matters so much. It is the engine that makes a global company actually work. These managers are the ones who empower their local teams to innovate while at the same time making sure everything they do still supports the company's bigger picture. That's what ultimately drives growth and creates fiercely loyal customers. So, as we wrap things up here, I want to leave you with this one thought, because it really captures the entire challenge perfectly. The true genius of global strategy isn't about choosing to be global or local. It's about finding that perfect and, frankly, ever-changing balance between the two. And that leaves us with a real question. In a world that changes faster every single day, how do you stay balanced?